the ground? Can we stop this gravity? It keeps bringing me down. I can't breathe and I don't wanna die. Can we stop this gravity? 'Cause I don't wanna say goodbye. I forgive the pain you gave to me so long ago. Sleepless nights I laid awake just begging to let go. I almost got to suicidal thoughts, but you stepped in. An angel sent from heaven showed me how to live again. Now I'm falling and I can't see the ground. Can we stop this gravity? It keeps bringing me down. I can't breathe and I don't wanna die. Can we stop this gravity? 'Cause I don't wanna say goodbye.
And I've been chilling, watching the ocean with you. Baby up with a slow motion crew. And we up in our clouds when people change, but not us. And we just chillin', kicking it, kissed by the sun. Could be soaked to the skin in the mall soon. I know she got the good vibes when seasons change, but we're the same. Even if I lost all my money, the zero runs deep, honey. And I don't need to speak a single word, 'cause you got me holding, holding. Even if my jokes aren't funny, my tongue tied up on it. And I don't need to speak a single word, 'cause you got me holding, holding. 'Cause you got me holding, holding. 'Cause you got me holding. And I'll be running, possessed by a low, low voodoo. Fired up like a wolf on a full moon. And we're stuck in a la la land. The tides will turn without us. And I'll be killing time like I might be a cartoon. Take it in real life like haiku. I know we got the good vibes when pieces fall right into place. Even if I lost all my money, the zero runs deep, honey. And I don't need to speak a single word, 'cause you got me holding, holding. Even if my jokes aren't funny, my tongue tied up on it. And I don't need to speak a
Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. Glad you were able to join us today. No Sean Kane, just Corey here. We'll have Adam Bittner on to talk maybe some more quarterback controversy and some Penn State football a little bit later in the show. The transfer portal has gone absolutely nuts, so we have a lot to talk about there. 2023 recruiting is still underway. Early signing day just a week or two away. Got a lot to talk about there. See you just after the other side of the intermission. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Corey Listoki. With me, not as always, the great Sean Kane, who is literally not with us tonight. Sorry about that. That's what happens when Sean's not here. Yeah, Sean just had some family things come up. Nothing too serious, but definitely, keep it in the back of your mind nonetheless. But he should be back with us on Sunday. I can tell you right now, the Sunday episode is going to be on Sunday night instead of Sunday morning. So we'll probably be Sunday night instead of Sunday morning. So since it's just me, make sure you guys are hopping on to YouTube and you're commenting. You've already liked the video. You're subscribed if you haven't been subscribed. I see Jacob Sparrow's already in the house. He says, all right. Let me take Sean's spot tonight. Hey, I'm going to be kind of counting on the chat a little bit to kind of keep the conversation going. As I said on the pre-show there, we do have Adam Bittner joining us again. He was on the show, I think, post-Michigan week, but before the Minnesota game, I believe. And so he'll be back. I'm sure he's going to want to talk Drew Allar because in his mind, what he thought was going to happen came to fruition. And he thinks he had the right plan after all. So we'll get him on. Sean's not here, so I'm drinking a little bit tonight. Made myself a double. We'll see how long that lasts for me tonight as well. We got a lot of talk about in the transfer portal news. I have and I'm sure a lot of people that have followed Penn State football or college football in general, transfer portal officially opened on Monday. Grad transfers could have gotten a little bit earlier, but Monday was the official day. And it has been draining 3 days to kind of focus in on who's in the portal, where people might go. It's been a lot. I will talk a little bit later in the show about what I think about the transfer portal. I think there's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to a certain degree as far as people getting upset about it that I think it will calm down after this year. But nonetheless, we'll talk about that a little bit later. 2023 recruiting class. We'll probably finish up the episode today on that. Some big recruits coming in here. I have 2 guys I expect to see commit to Penn State probably next week or 2. And so we'll get to those guys a little bit later. I think one of them was talked about significantly on Blue White Illustrated yesterday on their YouTube video. So check them out as well. We'll start the show with PSU and the NFL, and we do have some fan questions. So we got a pretty jam-packed show. It's going to be more pragmatic than usual because I got a lot to go through. I mean, I got notes for days here on what we need to talk about, and I got some pretty significant notes and some scribbles. So we do have a lot to talk about today. And so we it might not be as much dialogue as usual with Sean not being here, but we'll still have a good time nonetheless. I guess what I can do is throw up the show schedule. Approximately, if you're watching live, approximately at 9:30 Eastern, we'll have Adam Bittner on. So we have about 25 minutes until he blesses us with his presence. And so I want to go to PSU and the NFL first, like we usually do. And we'll kind of go from there. Jacob, I think you said you got the Sean solo show. I think you meant Corey, but I appreciate that nonetheless. Jacob, how are you doing tonight? And we'll kind of get right into this puppy. But let's start with PSU and the NFL. I guess we don't even need to go to the show schedule. I don't know why that word is choking me up so much today. It does remind me. So back before Sean joined me on this podcast adventure, I did this thing solo. Did it for about a year solo. So it's not live, but it's bringing me back to my roots a little bit here. See if we can throw that up for you guys. And we will just briefly show the show schedule, and then we will move right into PSU and the NFL. I don't think I put it down on the PSU and the NFL graphic. So we will just say this right away that John Reed did sign, former Penn State cornerback. He did sign. He was on, I want to say, the Arizona. It might have been the Atlanta practice squad, but regardless, Tennessee signed him off of the practice squad. He's now with the Tennessee Titans. And so he has signed that as well. And yeah, that Penn State basketball game was not great. I'm glad they played early, so I was able to watch it. But yeah, that was not a great showing by them, in my opinion. But let's go right into PSU and the NFL. And really, again, just an incredible week. I remember growing up watching Penn State football, and like, there's a lot of great defensive players in the NFL, but there really wasn't a ton of offensive talent in the NFL, and that has completely changed. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the list. It's just insane, honestly. Like it really is insane. Just how many guys are making impacts on NFL offenses. I thought I saw Mark Creeder comment something there, but I think it just disappeared on me. But Jahan Dotson, 5 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown, and his game back. Been having that nagging hamstring for a while. So that's nice to see him get back on. They actually have a bye week, so he should get even more healthy before they face the Giants yet again. So that's kind of weird. Play the Giants, bye week, then to play the Giants again. Speaking of Giants, Saquon Barkley, not a great day, 81 total yards, but he did have another touchdown. Miles Sanders, not a great day rushing, but he had a touchdown. I actually benched Miles Sanders this week. Higgins tried to tell me to play Miles Sanders, and I actually went against Higgins, which I usually don't do, but it paid off for me. Pat Freiermuth, no touchdown, but he had 3 catches, 76 yards. He's really started to become a safety blanket for Pickett there. So that's good for his future. Robbie Gould, I don't know if you guys saw this tweet by Sean on our Hardcore PSUFB Twitter, but he said something about Robbie Gould. The Bears are playing Sean's beloved Dolphins, and this will be Dolphin plug of the week for Sean. He'll be happy that I mentioned the Dolphins. But Robbie Gould, 4 for 4 on field goals, 3 for 3 on extra points, 15 points in that game against the Dolphins. So that was impressive to see. I can't believe he's still kicking it, literally and figuratively, of course. Chris Godwin Chris Godwin, I had a really close fantasy game this past week. Down to the last Monday night, he had Leonard Fournette, I had Chris Godwin, and it was like back and forth. on every dink and dunk pass by Tom Brady. And it was so close. And when Godwin scored that touchdown at the end of the game, and it was actually called back by another Penn State player in left tackle Donovan Smith, who had 2 holding calls on that drive. But the irony of Chris Godwin scoring a touchdown and getting called back by a former Penn State player, I thought was pretty funny. He still had 8 catches for 63 yards. But yeah, that was a nitty-gritty performance there for my fantasy squad. Thankfully, they're able to get the job done. I wanted to give a shout out to Jordan Stout, former Penn State punter. He had 5 punts. He had 6 punts total, but 5 of them inside the 20, which is just unreal. I think he had over 300 yards punting too for the day, which I don't, obviously 300 yards punting isn't the same as having 300 yards passing, but still pretty freaking impressive, all things considered. Nick Scott's been having a really good season. The Rams have not been having a good season. Defensively, Rams haven't even been very good. But Nick Scott's having a really good year, 8 more tackles. And then Carl Nassib, he had a sack in a big moment against Andy Dalton, who I still can't believe is in the NFL. So there's your PSU in the NFL for Week 13. I was going to go, if I pull up, and this is something I realized too, when you don't have as much dialogue, you don't necessarily, you get through things a lot faster. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So I can add some ad libs here, but we are going to breeze through some things a little bit quicker than maybe we usually do. So we still have 20 minutes until good old Adam Bittner joins us. So I say we go to fan questions right off the bat, kind of keep the interest alive here. So let's go fan questions next. I think we can get through. We only have 3 tonight. I think we can get through them. I made myself an old-fashioned Jacob Sparrow. Thank you for asking. Usually don't do it, but figured with Adam Bittner coming on, I need to start drinking early, since he's gonna throw us some Drew Allar should have started the whole season talk. I need to get a base layer. No, in all seriousness, we love Adam Bittner coming on. We love having the diverse perspectives, whether or not we agree with them. And he said something really nice about us. Basically, Adam Bittner doesn't have to have a platform on Twitter, right? He gets paid to do what he wants to do. We don't get paid anything. We're just here for fun. And he sure up said he respects us, and we can take it as much as we give it. So I respected him for saying that. And we, although we disagree on opinions regarding Penn State football, it is nice to have him on. He'll be on in about 19 more minutes. Let's go fan questions though, because why not? And look at that. The thing's actually working really fast today. So again, fan question time. If you're not already following us on Twitter, Hardcore PSUFB, we ask for questions all the time on Twitter. I think on Twitter, there's a little bell. If you hit that bell, every time we tweet, you'll get a notification. And one of those tweets are going to be saying, hey, we want your questions. Get your questions in. Twice a week right now, we're taking questions. Once the off season starts, when we go to once a week, we might not, might not be taking your questions every 2 weeks, maybe just once a week, but still give us your questions. We really appreciate it. Right off the bat here, we got Mr. Einstein von Braun, who's a local legend for us. And this maybe kind of, use the other side of the brain a little bit, because we haven't really been talking about realignment as much since the season has started. But now that we're getting kind of away from that a little bit, I think it's good to bring in some of those off-season topics, and realignment is one of them. And he says, has there been more chatter about other conference realignments out of USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten? I want to start with the Big Ten, though, because obviously Penn State's focused on that. And Matt Brown just released literally 5 minutes ago, a letter. Let me see if I can find it here. From the NCPA, which I do not know what that acronym stands for, but something to do with California. They released a letter to the UC Board of Regents requesting that they oppose UCLA's move to the Big Ten, arguing the move would hurt athlete health and academic outcomes, and that would only provide money that would benefit a few. And you can, again, find Matt Brown on Twitter at MattBrownEP. And I highly recommend it. He's got a newsletter that's really solid, too. Matt Brown does a good job of covering the non-football side of college football. And he does it for all athletics, too, not just college football. but he's a great great follow on Twitter. Highly recommend it. But I wanted to throw that out there because I think people think it's a done deal that UCLA gets to go. And I don't know if it is 100% a done deal there. And there's going to be some battling going on there. So pay attention to that. I think at the end it's not going to matter, but pay attention to that. I did kind of snoop around a little bit to answer this question because I hadn't really thought about it very much. And the SEC commissioner, Sankey, he said something to the lines of this week, hey, why would we expand? We're going to be at 16 teams once Oklahoma and Texas comes in. We're not going to expand just for the hell of it, right? Anyone that comes in is going to have to add value. And he was asked specifically about Notre Dame, and he still kind of said no. So who knows if that's just all smoke? I would find it very, very surprising if they wouldn't take Notre Dame if Notre Dame was interested. I would be surprised if they wouldn't take a Clemson if they were interested, or I don't know, trying to think of somebody in a different market that would help them. Maybe a Virginia, maybe a Cincinnati. If you go to the West Coast, maybe, I don't know where they're going to go. You could argue maybe in Arizona State if they want to go that direction. But regardless, I'd be surprised if they weren't interested. He made it seem like they 100% weren't interested. And I'm just not sure if I'm buying that. But that's the latest there. I did see, and this is probably about a month ago, actually, that UConn. Wouldn't be surprised if UConn is going to be joining the Conference USA. So keep that in mind. UConn having a pretty good year this year, going to be in a bowl game. I believe they are playing. It's going to take me a second to remember. Somebody interesting that we're kind of excited about. If someone remembers who UConn's playing, that'd be fantastic in chat. But yeah, that's all I got as far as Mr. Mister. As far as your question goes, nothing crazy yet. I think it's going to simmer down a little bit. I mean, that's what the Big Ten Commissioner Warren said. Like, it's not going to all happen in a frenzy at once. And so... And so, yeah, I would expect it to maybe calm down a smidgen more. Speaking of bowl games, we will have a bowl pick'em challenge. Probably going to get it out tomorrow, Thursday. I'm recording this Wednesday night. Probably be out tomorrow. So check Twitter. Basically, you're going to download the Excel spreadsheet. You're going to fill it out and you're going to email it back to me. I think we're going to do a $10 buy-in. So the more we get, obviously, the more money that's going to be in the pool, and we'll figure that out. So probably Venmo. Maybe I can hook up maybe PayPal, but we'll go from there. And thank you, Jacob. Yes, UConn plays Marshall, so I appreciate that. Let's go to the next question as we got 14 minutes till the Adam Bittner countdown starts. This is another good question. This one's from Mason Hicks, who's actually on YouTube tonight, so we appreciate that, Mason. And Mason also said Virginia Tech would be a good addition. Not gonna lie, yeah, I think Virginia Tech would be. Football's not there. Virginia Tech for a while there had like some of the most people in the transfer portal of anybody. And so Brent Pryce got some serious work there. Mark Creeder mentioned Deion Sanders is proving to be a thorn in everyone's side so far. Kreider, thank you. Appreciate that for correcting me. We'll talk Deion Sanders in a little bit for sure. And yeah, no doubt, Colorado has offered pretty much everybody, I feel like, in the transfer portal at this point. But let's get to Mason Hicks' question here. How do you feel about only 4 players entering the transfer portal? Do you think we'll lose more after the Rose Bowl, or is this pretty much it? How many guys would you like to see come in from the portal, and at what positions? Yeah, so we're going to talk a lot more about this after Adam Bittner comes on. So I don't want this to be, you guys get the vibe that this is the end of the conversation. And so if you're only watching the fan questions segment, because we put the fan questions segment out as its own video, I highly recommend you check out the full video because we're going to talk about this a lot more. But to answer your question, Mason, right now, technically there's 5 players in the transfer portal for Penn State, but still the point is still, important. Yes, I think we are going to lose more players in this, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more tomorrow. it's not a sprint when it comes to the transfer portal. It's going to be a little bit of a marathon. I mean, and very much the dominoes could fall, right? If Penn State gets a couple of defensive linemen, maybe a couple more come out. If Penn State gets a couple of corners, maybe a corner comes out, and Penn State gets a couple of wide receivers, maybe a wide receiver leaves. So it's not so much they all happen at once, then the floodgates open and then they close. It's going to be more of, a trickle down. It's going to be more of like a waterfall where, the top falls, and when that water collects, maybe water falls down to the next level and so forth. So it's just kind of starting. And so just keep that in mind as we go through this whole process. On top of that, I also think there are some players that want to go to the Rose Bowl and experience that, because Penn State hadn't been there since 2016. And so I think that does weigh a little bit onto it. And also, maybe some guys want to see how much they're going to play, right? Maybe they want to see, okay, the bowl game, being New Year's Six maybe isn't as developmental, but there's still going to be some developmental stuff going on. You still got 15 practices-ish to prepare for that. So they can kind of see where they're at as far as the pecking order before making that decision. I have heard rumors, and I'm not going to say specifics because I think they're still only rumors, and I have no confirmation of this yet, even though I've asked around to a couple of different people, that there are going to be some people that enter the transfer portal. And I will just say surprises and potentially important players for 2023 that have entered the portal or plan to enter the portal. Now, that could change. Those guys could potentially have a really good bowl game. But I've heard rumors, again, sort of speculating here, and I don't want to come off like I know, that's why I'm not going to say the names. But there are rumors of some more important players potentially entering the transfer portal after the Rose Bowl. So we'll keep an eye on that. If I get more sources confirming those things, if I get some people I trust to confirm things, then maybe we can go from there. But from now, I don't want to go down that road. But yes, I think more people will be joining the transfer portal, maybe before the Rose Bowl, and I think definitely after the Rose Bowl. And your final part of this question, how many guys would you like to see come in from the portal and at what positions? Yeah, we're going to talk more about this afterwards as well. The simple answer is you take as many good players as you can. I think you want to stockpile talent. I think this was a kind of a question last week, right? I take best available. Like, yeah, you want to get certain positions, but you also want to get really good players. Like, there's some interior offensive linemen that I really liked, and people on Twitter were like, why would we take an interior offensive lineman? And it's like, well, it's not an if, or it's not a, I guess what's the best way to say it? I guess we can have, why not both, right? Why not both? Take it. You can take an interior offensive lineman and still take the positions you think are important. So you go get the best players you think are going to help in the long run. As far as what positions, I think it's pretty obvious, right? I mean, you want to get wide receivers. You want to get defensive linemen, specifically interior defensive linemen. I think you would be silly if you're not looking for some offensive linemen. We don't know what the Kevon Lee, Devin Ford situation is. Neither of those guys are in the transfer portal yet. But with London Montgomery's injury, and you don't really know there, I think the 2023 class is going to pick up another running back. But you want to maybe consider getting another running back. I think you'd be kind of silly if you don't look at quarterback. If you can get a quarterback with experience to come in and be a backup for Drew Allar next year, in case something, God forbid, happens to Drew Allar, you don't have to turn just to Bo Perbula or a Jackson Smolik. So I think if you can find somebody that fits that role that's okay with it, might not be easy, I think you try to do that as well. So, yeah, that was a little bit of a tease. I'm sorry, Jacob. But I think those are the positions you got to be paying attention to, Mason. That being said, I've seen, there's a kicker from Columbia that they've been following, and maybe there's something there. I wouldn't be surprised if they get a kicker come in. But we'll have to wait and see. And I don't think it's a very concrete plan. I think it's hard to be concrete in a world of transfer portals. I think you have to have a pretty open mind to it. So we'll kind of see as it goes, and we'll talk more about this after we speak with Adam Bittner, because I think it's important to compare it or at least relate it to the 2023 recruiting class. That is, early signing day is just about 2 weeks away. 2 weeks away from starting today, actually. We got about 7 minutes. Let's roll into the last question here. And this one's from Lucas Powers. Again, another longtime listener, if you will. And he says, what do you think the quarterback split will be for the Rose Bowl? 50-50 would be a blast, and I think would make everybody happy. Yeah, I love Lucas for a lot of different reasons. He's very active on Twitter. He messages us things. Which, by the way, excuse me. My goodness. Einstein von Braun, Mr. Mister, Lucas Powers, Mike Vales, Aaron, and a couple others, Cowboy Ribeye, I think, to a certain degree. They do a great job of just tweeting us or mentioning us, like letting us know basically that that like what things are going on. So we appreciate those things. But I do like Lucas because Lucas provides a optimistic presence in our Twitter feed all the time. So we appreciate that, Lucas. Your question specifically about a quarterback split of 50-50. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's any way that happens. I've been on record and saying it over and over. I wanted this past game against Michigan State to be Sean Clifford's last game. That's not going to be the case. Sean Clifford's going to start. Sean Clifford is going to play the whole game unless for some reason they're blowing out Utah. Or he gets hurt. There's going to be no plan unless I'm just absolutely wrong that they're going to try to bring in Drew Allar to start the second half and play half of the game. It's just not going to happen. They haven't shown anything like that so far. It'd be kind of silly at this point to do it then. We're hoping maybe the Michigan State game was maybe the curtain call for Sean Clifford. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. So we love you, Lucas. I think this question is pretty optimistic. I don't think that 50-50 split's going to happen. And whether the fans would appreciate it or not, I'm on record. I wanted Drew Allar to start since that second loss, which Adam Bittner is in the studio, relatively speaking. And we'll be talking about that a lot in a second. But I was ready for Drew Allar after that second loss happened. And we can talk about that more, but especially for the bowl game, I was ready for Drew Allar, and I believe Sean was in the same department. So we'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be the Sean Clifford show, and we'll have to go from there. Again, we appreciate all of your fan questions. Hardcore PSUFB on Twitter is the place to be to ask us questions. You can also ask us questions on Facebook and just message us. We'll get them in there as well, but Twitter is kind of where we like to hang out. So thank you for those questions, everybody. We appreciate it. And now, if you saw me disappear, you probably thought something bad was happening. But I promise you nothing bad was happening. We do have Adam Bittner joining us now. Adam, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. So we did lose Sean today. He had some things pop up. So no Sean tonight. Let me see if I can get the cameras going here before we get started. Oh yeah, I see your camera's perfect already. Excellent. And we will get this rolling. There we go. Transition that over. And we are set. Yeah, looking nice. A little comb over going on there. Last time we didn't have the video hooked up, so we didn't get to see you, but now everyone gets to see you, and you're on the big screen.
Yeah, I took my evening shower, so I'm feeling refreshed and ready to talk some football.
You're an evening shower guy instead of morning shower guy?
I take my shower before I go somewhere. So it's whenever I'm going. So if it's the morning, if it's the evening, that's when I take my shower. But tonight I didn't go anywhere, so I was just doing it for fun.
Gotcha. You did it just for us. We get it. I understand that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I end up usually just if I'm doing something and actually being productive member of society, I usually just end up taking 2 showers. What ends up happening. But hey, let's talk Penn State football. And I think a lot of people thought that the news would die down a little bit with the final game happening against Michigan State. But I honestly was taking notes today for this episode. And I think this might be one of the most jam-packed shows. There's just been a frenzy of Penn State football news How are you feeling right now? The season just ended. What were your thoughts? We talked to you about halfway through the season. So I guess what are your thoughts on how Penn State finished? What are your thoughts as Penn State goes towards the Rose Bowl here?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say I have mixed feelings about it because I think there was a lot of great stuff that happened this year. I remember tweeting at the end of the Michigan State game a year ago that I thought the offense maybe had like 3 or 4 varsity players, like good players, and the fact that we're sitting here a year later and we have a whole bunch of names to talk about, to me that's a success, right? That you've done so much good development work in such a short period of time, that you've gotten back to, at least the level that you were at before 2020. Not that I ever felt the program really strayed from that in a meaningful way. But there was clearly some development that was lost in that period of time, and that hurt those 2020 and 2021 teams. And we saw them kind of get back into their groove. But of course, I was always the one leading the Drew Allar charge, and watching that, particularly that USC Washington or Utah game on Friday night, it was impossible for me to shake the feeling that, man, like, the hell with the preseason expectations, because I just looked at this team pretty much from the Ohio game and said, this team's pretty good, and allowed myself to, I think, dream a little bit, and I think that's where my disappointment with the quarterback situation and the way it played out came about, because a risk or two, I think, and I felt from the start that a risk or two could make the difference. And in hindsight, I think you'd have to look at it and say, yeah, like, maybe a risk or two could have changed things. I know there's people who are happy with where they were, given what the expectations were. I was an 8-4, 9-3 kind of guy from the start, and so I was wrong about that. But I kind of knew from the start that I might be wrong, and that you had a chance to get to 10 wins. And if you have a chance to get to 10 wins, the margin of getting to 11 is pretty fine. And I think that's pretty much the way things played out. So just a little conflicted, because you only get so many teams like this in a lifetime. I'm 32. This is one of the best Penn State teams I've ever had the pleasure of watching. And, I think that's kind of my origin point of this, is you can't take these things for granted. I feel really good about where Penn State's going next year. But, they could be an injury or two away from being a 9-3 and 8-4 team and underachieving what we're all expecting. And so there was always a sense for me of, like, seize what you've got when you've got it. There's been Penn State teams we've had really high expectations for that they just fell short. And so when you had a chance with these guys, I would have liked to see them gamble a little bit more. I understand the argument otherwise. They ended up in the Rose Bowl. That's pretty awesome. People are going to have their parties. A lot of people are going to be out in Pasadena, and that's great. And I think the nature of the bowl game kind of changes the way I feel about the season a little bit, because it is the Rose Bowl, and you do have a chance to get a good win instead of closing out with, even though I thought that Memphis team was pretty good 3 years ago, it was still Memphis, and it wasn't going to get a lot of people fired up. And I think the same would have been true if they ended up in the Cotton Bowl against Tulane, or if they'd ended up in the Citrus Bowl against like an 8-4 SEC team. I think LSU's there now, so that might have been fun to watch, but the chances that it could have been like Ole Miss or something, because you were assuming that LSU was going to win that game and be higher up in the pecking order. The Texas A&M game I'm referring to. So yeah, that's my long rambling way of saying I'm conflicted about the present, feeling really good about the future, but conflicted about the present.
Yeah. Yeah, they did play LSU in a Citrus Bowl. I would have expected it to rain and be one of the awful field conditions like it was. I guess that would have been, almost 12 years ago now, whatever the case may have been. You said a lot there. Let's break it down in pieces before we get to the heavy-hitting items. I wanted to talk first about what you thought about the offensive weapons, right? You thought going into the year you weren't sure. The tight ends were very unproven. The wide receiver core, besides Parker Washington, was very unproven. And, I mean, you said roster spots in general as far as, being impressive. The offensive line, to a certain degree, was unproven. So just looking at the pieces around quarterback, how much better do they, I guess, grade out to you? And how much better do you feel about the guys that are probably going to return for next year?
I mean, I'm really thrilled with the work that was done at tight end. I think that was probably the biggest disappointment of the 2020, 2021 range was, Penn State was starting to become tight end right? With Gesicki, and those guys. And so you kind of had this higher expectation of those guys. And I think we finally got to see them realize that this year. So I think there's great work that was done there. The line, I think they did some good work, but I also think you saw the difference that 5-star athletes can make, and they can make plays, especially at the college level. I think it's a little bit different in the pros, but at the college level, you don't have to give those guys massive holes, right? You can just give them smaller holes and they can hit them hard and make plays. And I think that's what we saw. So, I think they developed well there, but I guess I give that a B because I think a lot of that improvement is due to having some awesome weapons. The receivers, I think, there's probably a little bit of disappointment considering, where we've seen them in recent years. Some true bona fide NFL talents. I don't know that I think Parker Washington will probably play on Sundays, but, is he going to be a Jahan Dotson type guy drafted at the top of the draft? I don't know. So all in all, but I think the big thing for me is like all of those guys were college football players, Big Ten players. And, there weren't a whole lot of weak links, whereas a year ago, I don't think that could have been said.
Yeah. And I don't think Parker Washington, even if he decides to come back next year and has a fantastic year, I still don't think he gets to that Jahan Dotson level in as far as draft grade goes. You mentioned, and that's something I agree with, that, you can't take, these teams for granted, right? You can't take, as much hype as the 2023 season might have and as much hype as the 2024 season may have down the road. I 100% agree. You can't take, that doesn't mean anything really when it's all said and done. And I go back to a funny story I once had after the 2016 Rose Bowl game. And I didn't go out to Pasadena for it. And I remember talking to my mom about that and like how I wanted the whole family to go out, and obviously being a broke college student, couldn't pay for it myself. And my mom told me, she was like, well, why don't we just wait another year and we can just go to the semifinal game? And I still think to a certain degree that was the kiss of death that ruined the 2017 season. So if you need her address or her email address, we can give that out to people. But that's like the exact reason, right? Like, you don't know. The 2016 season team wasn't probably as good as the 2017 team, but as far as, the way the ball bounces and the cookie crumbles, 2017 was disappointing. So we could come back absolutely next year and be disappointing. And I think that would be a shame if what you think is true, which I think is what we're here to talk about. And that is, starting Drew Allar from the get-go, or at least maybe starting Drew Allar once you thought you knew what he had. And that obviously varied, but you thought you had seen enough good from Drew Allar pretty much after the Ohio Auburn game, and you were ready for him to start pretty much all of true Big Ten play.
I was ready during Ohio. Seeing it in person, seeing the throws he could make that Sean Clifford plainly can't, and just kind of getting the sense that Penn State's starting from behind the 8 ball, right? Because look how good this Michigan team ended up being. Other than the Ohio State Michigan game, Ohio State was really good. And so you need to take risks sometimes to beat teams like that. And I think you guys were arguing the conservative case, which is, Sean Clifford's been in these moments. He knows what to do before the snap. He can make those differences there. Broadcasters talked about it in every game. To me, it was always more about arm talent and really feeling like anything less than 10 and anything less than 11-1 was going to on some level be a disappointment in my eyes, because I thought this team was pretty good. And so I would have liked to see them take some risks, and if they burned out, well, guess what? They could have gone 9-3 and ended up in Pasadena, because the Big Ten is not great this year. And I think that's really the source of frustration for a lot of people, is they didn't get that big win. They didn't get like the Wisconsin win from last year. They didn't get that Auburn win at home. That satisfying. Yeah, I think the Auburn game this year at the time felt great, but if you look back at it in hindsight, what did it really mean? And I think that's a frustration for a lot of people, is if you had a couple of good wins, maybe you could have lived with the way things turned out. But the Big Ten was just such a disappointment. And that's not to take away from what this team did. A lot of people try to do that and say that it's not very good because well, it didn't beat anyone. I disagree. I think it's pretty good, and it didn't get a chance outside of those 2 games to beat anybody. But still, you have to frame it. If the whole season was about those 2 games, what could you have done differently? And you guys, I know you guys like to say, well, could you have blocked JTT? And the answer is no, I couldn't have blocked him. I don't think anyone at Penn State could have blocked him. He had a great day. But when we spoke the last time, I think the thing that I kind of highlighted was you want to take yourself out of those situations by making those plays ahead of time where, maybe that arm talent shows up earlier, makes some throws that Clifford didn't make. Instead of being up 5, they're up 12, and have a little bit more of a cushion for a mistake. And that's where I think the difference, Drew Allar could have made would have been. Now, that's not to say that I was ever certain how things would turn out. I think Sean Clifford definitely closed a lot better than I expected him to, and I'll give him props for that. I do the PFF grades for the Post-Gazette. I try to do them 3 times a year after each 4-game set, and he just kept creeping up compared to where he started the year. So you got to give him credit for that. But that's just my general opinion, is that if you have a player with more talent in a situation where Penn State was, it's worth rolling the dice. Now, I'll say this: if there was a 12-team playoff today, would I have been fine with rolling with Sean Clifford and saying, 10-2 is good enough, that's going to get Penn State there? Sure, it would be a different conversation. But when there's only 4 teams in the playoff, I think there's something to be said for taking risks, and they still could have had a pretty nice reward at the end anyway.
Yeah. I'll start by saying you talked about the big, not really having that big win. And that was something that James Franklin even mentioned, I think, in the press conference. It might have been before the Michigan State game. It might have been after the Rutgers, whatever. It was in between there somewhere. And yeah, I think that's a kind of a big knock on this Penn State season so far. I think that's why, even though the bowl games moving forward are probably going to have even less significance, this being potentially one of the last true normal Rose Bowls, but also this being Penn State's really only 3rd opportunity for a great win, makes this game really important for James Franklin and his Penn State football program. Because it's one thing to say, and you and I agree, like, good teams don't have to have good wins to be good teams. They can still be good teams, and we think Penn State is. But you got another opportunity to kind of prove it. And, okay, it's one thing to not beat Ohio State and Michigan. They're going to potentially play each other in a national championship. But you got another opportunity against a Utah team who has shown some signs of being weak and losing to teams that maybe they weren't even supposed to. And you kind of have to find a way to win this one to kind of prove that everything wasn't, I guess, everyone was wrong to a certain degree. So I agree with you. I think this Rose Bowl is a really important game to kind of prove that, right? I mean, you can say it's not our fault Maryland was bad. It's not our fault Minnesota was bad. It's not our fault Auburn was bad. It's not our fault Michigan State was bad. But you got another chance against Utah to kind of prove that once and for all, and to say, yes, we really were not just the 3rd best team in the Big Ten, but we really were a top 10 team in the country. And we just all happened to be, 3 of us happened to be in the same division. So I 100% agree with that. And I want to concede, going back to that Ohio State game, if I knew Sean Clifford was going to have 4 turnovers, now I don't necessarily put those 4 turnovers on him. Again, we can, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But if I knew at the end of the day, statistically, he was going to be accounted for 4 turnovers, I am 100% starting Drew Allar too. I 100% agree with that. Like, if I knew that was going to be, in games like that, you need Sean Clifford. We all kind of argued that Sean Clifford would provide the opposite of that. Now, to be fair, he provided some maybe a little bit more uncharacteristic sparks and some other crazier plays than he had shown. The Theo Johnson throw, for example, the one toss to Katron Allen. I mean, he did some things to make up for it. But you weren't asking, when you were starting Sean Clifford, you weren't asking Sean Clifford to be the reason you won. You were asking him to be the reason you didn't lose. And he did not do that. And although they were up 21-16 and the defense came out and laid an egg in that 4th quarter, maybe enough pressure early on with Drew Allar throwing a couple more passes and Penn State having a lead, I mean, maybe Penn State runs away with it the way they looked against Michigan in the fourth quarter. I mean, that could have completely gone a different way, especially with the way Penn State was running the ball. I still say if Penn State was able to get that final stop there before that 35-second drive and on a 3-play touchdown drive by Ohio State, if Penn State is able to get a punt there, I don't know if Ohio State ever gets the ball back. I mean, Katron Allen was running for 4.5-ish yards per clip. I mean, they were running the rock, and for once, they actually might have had the offense to run a 4-minute drill and put that one in the book, and that just never happened. So I agree. I think, in hindsight, I wasn't ready for Sean Clifford to have those turnovers, and I don't really know if anyone was ready for him to have 4 turnovers. But I would say, yeah, I mean, if he was going to have 4 turnovers, then, yeah, give me Drew Allar, because at least – he might have 4 turnovers too, but maybe he does something else significant at some point in that game.
Yeah, I mean, don't you want to at some point, in your life? How many Penn State Ohio State games have we watched? How many Penn State Michigan games have we watched? Don't you want to see Penn State break a good team's back and win, and not just hold on? But I think of the 2005 Ohio State game. They held on that night, and it was a great game. But they were holding on that night. 2008, they had to hold on. 2016, they needed the blocked field goal. You'd like them to be in these positions where they've gotten to James Franklin's credit, where they have leads on this team. And you want to do what Michigan was able to do to Penn State, because that game was not a blowout the entire way. And there were times that I thought Penn State could get the job done that day. And after that first half went the way it went, I thought, all right, they're still in the game. You still have a chance to make a few plays and win the game. They had Ohio State on the ropes, and that's kind of the point. I don't fault Sean Clifford dramatically for the 4 turnovers either. I try not to throw that around too flippantly, although it is a fact. But to me, it's I look at things very data. I'm kind of data driven. That's kind of my role at the Post-Gazette, because everyone else is in the eye test. Analysis wing. I'm the one person who kind of just likes to look at the numbers. And you're right. If you have a different quarterback, the game's going to play out differently. You're not putting Drew Allar in a specific situation that Penn State was in. It's about the game playing out differently and having more of a margin of error and putting yourself in a position where he can make throws that can break a team's back. And that's what it was always for. I will say this about the Rose Bowl. I think you were answering Lucas's question before. You got to win the Rose Bowl, and if that's the reward for the conservatism that Penn State's played this season with, then you need to go out and get the big win. And if that's with Sean Clifford, so be it. I don't think there's a lot of experience to be gained on Drew Allar's part by playing one half of one game at the end of the season. So I have no problem with them going with Clifford at this point, because now you need to get that one win to validate things.
Sure.
And I think Sean Clifford has played better. You have a whole season with him behind those guys at this point, not 6 games as we had been talking about early in the season. So, I guess that's a bit of a plot twist, but go win the Rose Bowl.
That's true. I think the Rose Bowl is a little bit different than if it's the Cotton Bowl versus Tulane or someone else to that extent. Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking about this earlier and how, when they decided after that second loss, right, it was November and people were like, okay, what's the game plan? And they decided to go with Sean Clifford. And to be fair, they blew out everybody for the most part. I think it would have been disappointing if they would have won those games in November and then still ended up in the Citrus Bowl or something else. I think that would have been even a bigger missed opportunity for Penn State, right? In all, when it's all said and done, if they ended up winning the Rose Bowl this year, obviously they exceeded everyone's expectations already for the most part. But if they go ahead and win the Rose Bowl, at least you can say, yeah, maybe Drew Allar could have got more playing time, and maybe he could have even turned the tides in the Ohio State game. But we got a Rose Bowl, and that's good. But if they aren't able to even get to the Rose Bowl, I think we're thinking a lot differently about how those final 4 games have kind of played out. With Drew Allar, he got some time against Indiana, got a lot of time against Indiana. Got some time against Maryland, although a lot of people thought that was poorly mismanaged. And then obviously, Michigan State, it didn't happen at all. I think people could look at that and be pretty upset if they don't get to the Rose Bowl, and maybe they'll still be if they don't end up winning the Rose Bowl.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think getting to the Rose Bowl changed a lot of things. Even if it is symbolic, because it really would have been a huge disappointment to end up in a lesser bowl than that with this team, and that gets back again to the taking chances. You don't want to be in that position. You don't want to be at the mercy of the way the national picture plays out. You don't want to be at the mercy of, because the tie-ins this year are difficult for Penn State, right? Because you have both the Peach and the Fiesta, which have 4 at-large spots. We wouldn't have been having this conversation if it wasn't this 1 out of every 3 years where most of the games that are available outside the playoff are already tied in. So they wouldn't have been vulnerable. They would have easily been going to the Fiesta Bowl, easily going to the Peach Bowl, possibly easily drawing a great opponent. But because of the way the national landscape, set up this year, they were in a bad position. And credit to them for breaking through. And it's good that they got there, but they were really close to not, right? There was only a couple games go the other way, and you're right. We're talking about a Citrus Bowl against an LSU team that I don't know how to feel about them. They have some great wins, but they got their doors blown all the way off 3 times, and they lost on a missed extra point. So, how much are you really taking out of that win other than the fact that it's an SEC team? I
can tell you right now, I can tell you LSU is not very good. I'm confident in that at this point, that LSU is not that good. They showed up and had their moment in overtime against Alabama, but that took a night game in Death Valley, and to be honest with you, against an Alabama team that's not to Nick Saban standards. Yeah.
So things played out, and I was amazed by some of those guys talking on the Michigan State, the broadcasters. They're like, yeah, they're going to a New Year's Six game. At that point, when the Penn State game ended that night, they were not in position to go to a New Year's Six game. And the one thing I didn't think we really realized was Ohio State was probably going to opt out of the Rose Bowl, and Penn State would have ended up there. But as far as the way things should have gone, at that moment, at the end of the Penn State game, they were not going to a New Year's Six Bowl. And that was, that's how close they came. Their season's over, and they were not in position, and they needed things to happen. And so that's also the risk of playing it safe sometimes, right? Is that even if you're a good team, you might not get a reward that justifies the season. So I don't want to look too far back at this point, because they got where they needed to go. And, so you can't cry over not spilled milk, right?
Yeah. And, you could be Tennessee, right? I mean, this is a really good year for Tennessee, all things considered. And they end up losing their quarterback, and they end up, in a probably not where they, where they really wanted to be when it's all said and done. You beat Alabama, and you take, you only have a loss to Georgia. You're not expecting to lose to South Carolina, and they had everything still in front of them to the very end. And so it's probably disappointing for them too, even though that's a lot better than they've ever been for a long time. I do want to ask you though, because I know Sean will wanted this question asked, and I'm trying to make sure I kind of say it the right way. We got to see more Drew Allar, right? Not a bunch more, but we got, especially in the Indiana game, a little bit in the Maryland game, a little bit in the Rutgers game. From what you saw, because in my opinion, I'm not raising the red flag. And I'm not even skeptical at this point. But there have been throws that maybe we didn't see the last time we had you on that we saw since then. And there was a little bit more inconsistency. I will say I've been a positive of his ability to run. I think he's impressed me more with his mobility than I thought he had. So that's a huge plus that I didn't think he had. But there's been some inconsistencies with his accuracy, not to the point where I think it's a trend. But A, are you concerned about that moving forward? And B, do you think Penn State's able to win that first game against Purdue if Drew Allar has to start from the beginning?
Well, I think those were some of the only snaps that we saw of him in all season that really mattered. And so I think that's what makes it a little hard to judge, is that he was coming in late in blowouts and he was making some laser rocket throws. And yeah, he's making some mistakes, but you also know they're probably not going to burn him, right? So I think that changes the tenor of the performances. He did slip a little bit analytically. I think Sean Clifford ended up finishing with a better grade. And that was the jumping off point I think I pissed everyone off with, was I wrote early in the season that the analytics on Drew Allar in a very small sample size were arguably already better than what Sean Clifford was doing. And to Clifford's credit, and to I think the team's credit, they kind of found their rhythm, by the end, and that's why Sean was able to kind of leap up over. So yeah, I think it's hard to evaluate Drew Allar in that sense, because it's easy to just kind of play differently when you're in easy situation. Like, I'm thinking of the end of the game against Indiana. I mean, everyone knew that game was over when Allar was in there. And so maybe he's not being as fine as he might have been if, that drive against Purdue. So it's hard to say. But I will say that, yes, the analytics did slip, and Sean Clifford's improved. So, credit to him. And, I don't, but looking forward with a full off season, I don't have a whole lot of concern about Drew Allar. I think, look at the guys that Penn State's had historically come in and play as young players. I think he's in a lot better position. And I think that was the goal, right? You wanted him to sit behind Sean Clifford. You wanted to have that mentorship. Yeah, I can't really think of a moment where Penn State super had that, in the recent past. I guess Trace McSorley and Cliff were there together. It's hard to remember that because it's like, I tweeted out at one point, I'm 32, and Sean Clifford's been on Penn State's roster for 1 out of every 5 days I've been alive, So how much influence did Trace McSorley ultimately have on, Sean Clifford? It's a good question to ask. And I think, that's one of the bonuses of what you ended up doing. And now that this is all over and the debates are kind of settled and the season was what it was, I think it definitely helped him to be behind Clifford. And so, no, I don't have a ton of concern.
Yeah. And to be fair, like, this team blew out teams more than Trace McSorley led teams, whether that was Sean Clifford's reason or not, or I guess the reason that happened or not, it doesn't really matter. But Drew Allar got more. And also, I think they were pushing for it more. But Drew Allar got more playing time than Sean Clifford did when Trace McSorley was quarterback. I mean, the Daniel George throw was, at the beginning of the season against Akron, and like after that, we didn't really see much Sean Clifford. So, I mean, even Trace McSorley only came in when Hackenberg was there, when Hackenberg was hurt or like struggling. And so we and then obviously the bowl game when things changed against Georgia, but. This was an obvious effort, right? This is an obvious effort to get him in, but they also blew out teams. I think they had ended up with 6 28-point wins this season, which I think we did the numbers on a previous episode, but that was like way more than even the 2017 or 2018 teams. And so he got more chances. I guess my thing is, he played more than a lot of other true freshman quarterbacks typically play. Even blue chip quarterbacks usually get to play. I guess my question for you is, knowing everything you know right now, which to be fair probably isn't that much, are we putting the expectations high for Drew Allar right off the bat? I mean, if you were thinking, there's a risk reward this year with Drew Allar, are you going into next year saying, floor 9-3, ceiling 11-1? Or are you thinking floor 8-4, ceiling 11-1? Like, how much of that risk has been removed in your mind, I guess, is the best way to ask that.
I mean, I think it partly depends upon the offseason he has, right? I think that was the thing that surprised everyone, was how quickly he looked like that against Ohio. I think people were surprised when he was announced as the number 2, because there wasn't a ton of expectation that they were going to, plant that flag in the ground and say he's going to be the guy, and he's going to get time when games aren't close. And so if he can take a similar leap, and they always say, one of the biggest leaps you take is year 1 to year 2. So if he can have a similar offseason to what he had this season and come in and surprise people, I don't think, a floor of 10-2 is unreasonable to. I mean, that's why you go out and get guys like this. And Penn State's, we're just not used to it, right? We're not used to heaping expectations on blue chip talents like this, because, they've, other than what, Morelli and Hackenberg in a terrible situation. Who is the closest comparison point for Drew Allar? There really, I think it's really just Morelli. And I think that's probably, that's the only concern you'd have is, okay, Morelli sat for a long time, and he came in and he disappointed. But geez, it's I guess it's getting too far from Anthony Morelli for me to like really remember how I felt about the throws he was able to make compared to Michael Robinson, who was a phenomenal guy in 2005. So there's no real direct comparison, and so I'm not, just the way college football is today. I think Penn State fans should be allowed to dream, and just be cautiously optimistic that this is what you've been waiting for. And if it's not, then then back to the drawing board, I guess. But you've lived your whole life without it anyway, right? Most of your life without this kind of possible player or quarterback. I just keep coming back to the big time throws that Pro Football Focus measured as kind of that indication that he's different. And that doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can't coach and that you're going to have to change, and that he's going to have to learn those pre-snap reads and things and get better at that. And I think that's what this offseason is going to be about, right? Is now you're at the college level. Physically, you're probably where you need to be. But are you there mentally? Can you be like Sean Clifford was mentally? If you can, that's a dangerous combination.
Yeah, I honestly only remember the bad throws that Morelli made, so it's hard for me to remember a good throw he ever made at this point. It just seared into my brain. My granddad screaming at the television after like the third pick six in the Ohio State game that one year or whatever it was. I think Malcolm Jenkins, I still think he fumbled the football before he got in the end zone on that one touchdown, but that didn't really make it much of a difference. I think it's a good point, right? Like this is uncharted territory, and I don't really know if there is back to the drawing board, right? I think to a certain degree, and I'm going to talk about this, after you hop off, as far as the transfer portal goes, people are kind of like talking about what Penn State sort of needs or nonchalantly. In my opinion, some of these guys that I'm about to talk about on receiver wise, I'm like, Penn State has to get a couple of these guys, because I haven't seen enough from what they currently have in a wide receiver department to feel good. And I'm like, you have a chance to stockpile talent for your 5-star quarterback. If there's ever a time to empty the pockets and to put as much talent as you can around a guy, this is the moment. You got a couple guys that I'm about to talk about that have 2 years of eligibility left. You can surround this guy with as much talent as possible. And if you aren't successful, right, like whether it's Drew Allar's fault, whether it's the offensive line's fault, whatever the case may be, I guess that's why I'm super nervous, right? What happens if this doesn't pan out? And I know this is probably a conversation we can have in a couple months, but it's one thing in 2022 to have Drew Allar come in, make some, mistakes and laugh it off. It's another thing to come into next year, most likely, expected to be a top 10 team to start the year. Having potential, having for sure the Big Ten champion at home in Michigan. And it's funny how that has slowly transitioned to Michigan instead of Ohio State, and not taking advantage of this opportunity, Adam. This has turned into cautiously optimistic to, we got to make something happen. If not now, then when, sort of thing. Maybe not 2023, but 2024. But we got to see this moving in the right direction, or else we all get super nervous and start having meat sweats in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that this can play out at this point in terms of adding personnel. I think, the best case scenario is you do get a blue chip guy that's going to come in here and go for 1,500 yards and be a Jahan Dotson type, and kind of adding that component back to this offense. I wouldn't say that that's like kind of make or break, because, you were close against Ohio State, and that would have been enough, to be in the playoff at this point if you win that game. And for me, the biggest frustration with Penn State's passing game, other than, not quite having the, as much as people love both Sean Clifford and Trace McSorley for different reasons, as much of a gamer as Trace McSorley was, I think there's a lot of people that would have loved to have a Drew Allar talent on those teams, right? I think that's fair to say. And so, below that, I've always been frustrated by Penn State not having kind of a 3 receiver trio, never having those 3. It's really been since Derek Williams, Deion Butler, and Jordan Norwood that they've had 3 guys out there, that could really stretch out a defense. And so to me, yes, that's the A+ scenario. Get an impact receiver, put him with Parker Washington, and hope you can develop. But like, you need to have 3 solid guys, I think. And granted, the tight ends are going to take up a lot more targets, and maybe it's an unreasonable expectation for me to say, yeah, distribute the ball to all 3 of these tight ends and distribute it to the top 3 receivers, and they're all putting up big stats. Maybe some of that is unrealistic. What I think I want to see is a third receiver that can make plays when you really need them. I think we saw flashes from Keandre Lambert-Smith this year. But it's kind of the same as Saeed Blacknall, right? I think we all wish things had got a little bit better with him as a third receiver. And he made, huge plays in that Big Ten championship game. But, when it mattered, wouldn't you have loved to see him show up? And I think that's kind of my baseline expectation. If you can roll in with 3 guys you feel really good about, I think that changes the complexion of this offense. And so you don't necessarily need to have a Jahan Dotson type, a big impact, Chris Godwin, because I keep saying Jahan Dotson's name over and over, KJ Hamler. You want to just be able to distribute, because I think that was a big flaw with the 2019 team, right? Is that Pat Freiermuth and KJ Hamler were really good, but they were the only guys that were getting passes. And so that's kind of where I'm at is, yes, there's the A+ scenario, but I also think they can be national championship. I'll temper expectations. They can be playoff caliber with 3 solid guys that can make a play whenever you need them to. And I think that'll really help Drew Allar out.
Yeah, I was going to go to Saeed Blacknall right away, because Saeed Blacknall, Big Ten championship, showed up. I think he had a touchdown in every whiteout he was in. That's probably not exactly accurate, but he always showed up in the whiteout games. Yeah, 2016, you had Hamilton, you had Godwin, you had a couple of guys making some plays. Not necessarily the case to a certain extent. We'd seen splashes, right? I mean, you said Ohio State, they were close even without that, but that took Parker Washington having 180 yards, and that's not something he usually is going to be able to do for you. So even then, you're like, well, maybe we still needed that, and just not ask Parker Washington to have whatever amount of catches he ended up having. But no, I think that's a good point. I think Penn State was hoping to have that this year with Mitch Tinsley, with Keandre Lambert-Smith, and with Parker Washington. And I thought for a second, that Purdue game, Keandre Lambert-Smith looked for real. Even though he had a drop earlier in that game, he looked like coming out of that game, you're like, okay, Keandre Lambert-Smith is here. He's breaking tackles. He's showing speed. We're ready, baby. Mitch Tinsley, I think, had 3 catches on that final touchdown drive against Purdue. And you're like, all right, here we go. And Parker Washington didn't really show up until the Minnesota game. But after that point, you're feeling pretty good. But it never really came into fruition. And now you start kind of asking questions like, is Keandre Lambert-Smith going to be that next year? Is Harrison Wallace going to be that next year? Is Amari Evans going to step up and be that? Is Parker Washington even going to be here? That's, to me, this thing that scares me most. You got this quarterback. I don't care if you try to get all of these guys on the transfer portal and just bring them in for tryouts. You better find... You said 3. I would be happy if you can find 2 and still have a really good tight end, but you got to find something, because otherwise it's going to be a big waste. I want to let you get out of here. I've enjoyed the company with Sean not being here. I want to give you a second to drop some plugs, but before you do, quick thoughts on the Utah game. You probably don't have a prediction yet, but what is your vibe going into this well-coached Utah team again in the Rose Bowl?
I kind of have they are very good. I've enjoyed watching them. I get the hype for them, but they lost some games too. We saw them win the big games, and I think that may have gotten them on tilt a little too much. I think they're a beatable team. I think with Penn State's athleticism, they can win that game. Yeah, I'm not quite ready to make a prediction yet, but I think there's been a little bit of fear based on how Utah closed with beating USC that I think sells Penn State a little bit short. Penn State dominated teams, and that Utah defense gave up points in almost every game I watched. I think of that UCLA game, they were going back and forth and just trading haymakers. And I don't really doubt Penn State's ability to score some points in this game. The question is, can you prevent Cam Rising from just gritting you to death, right? And just the way he keeps coming all the time is something that I envy. He's never really out of a game. It's fun to watch. But yeah, I think people are selling Penn State a little bit short. I think they're going to be kind of in an underdog role, just from a national perspective, that I think they're going to relish. And I'd be surprised if they didn't play a good game out there. That doesn't mean I'm guaranteeing a win, but I think I feel a little bit better about their chances in this game than a lot of pundits do.
Yeah, the line was, I think, started out as a straight up pick 'em at first, and I think it's moved to Penn State or maybe even to Utah to 1.5. It's been kind of going back and forth, but I think that's a good point. I mean, again, this is a Utah team that surrendered 42 to UCLA. It's a team that lost to Oregon when they probably shouldn't have. It's a team that lost to Florida, which, looking back now, is a pretty awful loss. I think there's a lot of parallels that we can make between Cam Rising and Sean Clifford to a certain extent too. It's going to be something. But Adam, appreciate your time as always coming on here. I'm glad you're able to come back for a second time, and please plug away what you got going on here. Obviously the Steelers season is in the thick of things. I think they play Baltimore down the stretch here too, right?
Yeah, the Steelers have an interesting setup. There's a lot. I mean, they probably won't be facing Lamar Jackson this week, and otherwise they play a bunch of bad teams. So, I don't know if winning out's is going to be enough in this AFC to get into the playoffs, but it's hard to not feel like a lot better than you felt about this team about a month ago. So, we're hoping for some interesting talk over on the Post-Gazette YouTube channel. Myself and Chris Carter host most of our content over there, but Noah Hiles, who covers Pitt, and Andrew Destin, who covers Penn State, do the college football show every Thursday. So that'll be out tomorrow because we're recording right now on Wednesday. So be sure to check out those guys. They do a great job every week talking about both local teams that we cover in earnest. Signing day is going to be coming up. We talk about it all on the YouTube channel. It's a new venture at the Post-Gazette. We're trying to branch out into a new world here. We're a hidebound old newspaper trying to learn some new tricks. So check us out. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything if you're a Pittsburgh fan. If you're from other regions of Penn State, the Penn State universe, I'm sure you're not going to be quite as interested. But if you are a Pittsburgher, Western Pennsylvania resident, or someone who's in the Pittsburgh diaspora living somewhere in the South or somewhere out west, check us out because we have content coming to you 6 days a week. We only take Saturdays off.
I have the Steelers defense in my fantasy lineup right now for Sunday. Is that a good idea, you think, with Huntley starting over there, or should I make a swap?
I think they can generate some turnovers against him. I think they're getting pressure and they've been much better against the run, which has allowed Minkah Fitzpatrick to kind of play that center field role and make plays that he wasn't able to make last year because he was coming up in run support. So I think there's a chance they could score some points, get a few sacks on this guy, and maybe generate a few turnovers, give you a nice fantasy day.
Okay, yeah, you'll have some hate tweets coming your way otherwise. No, I mean, the little ESPN blob thing said that the Steelers have done really well against running quarterbacks too. So I don't know what that's really worth, but hopefully that is true. I was gonna say one more thing about something Pittsburgh related. Oh, I gotta ask you this because I think it's hilarious. Purdue, any chance?
Hey, you never know. I mean, I think they feel pretty good going into next year with Phil Dracovic, coming from Boston College. Frank Signetti worked with him up there, so I think that's a reunion. I think they're hoping it's going to be a little bit better than the Keaton Slovis experiment was this year. I think the problem is they're losing some pretty good players. Israel Abanikanda is probably going to the draft. Kajaya Kancey is one of the best pass rushers in the country. Servassier Dennis is really good. They're probably going to be losing all of those guys. So that's going to be tough for them, but I think they feel optimistic about, kind of pairing up a good quarterback or a guy that you think could be a good quarterback with his coordinator, late in his career.
Yeah, I didn't want all that Pitt talk. I just wanted to just say, yes, Narduzzi is going to Purdue.
He is. It's a done deal.
Thank you. That's all. I honestly, I just think it comes together so well. Purdue-y. I mean, it really is a match made in heaven. But Adam, look, we got a long off season ahead of us. I'm sure we'll get you back on at some point here in the spring. But we really appreciate you hopping on for about an hour or so. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, guys.
All right. Adam Bittner, can find him on Twitter. I'm sure at some point we will be what is the Twitter handle real quick, Adam?
Fujimaster24.
Fujimaster24.
FBI.
Yes.
You can find me there, or you can just search Adam Bittner. I do not have Twitter Blue verification. I got the legit one. So
he's not paying for it. That means he's legit. We will also include his Twitter handle when we tweet the episode out on Hardcore PSUFB. And I'm sure we will quote tweet him, dunking on him, because he gives us so many alley-oops. It's not even funny. Thank you, Adam, so much, man.
Thanks, Corey. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you have a good night.
Peace.
All righty. Well, we are back. Again, thank you so much to Adam Bittner coming on. It's look, I'm gonna be honest, like, and it's me, it's not Sean. I shouldn't say we. It is 100% me. Whenever Adam says something on Twitter I disagree with, I kind of try to dunk on him a little bit. But like I said, he said something really nice about us, said he respected us. You know, what we're doing here, you know, and we can take it, we can give it and receive it, all that good stuff. So we respect him. And it's important, not just in the college football world, but in life, to take in different perspectives and to grow a little bit. And so Adam definitely does that, makes us kind of use the other side of our brain to a certain degree. So thank you to him. Again, Post Gazette on YouTube, they're moving in over there, so definitely subscribe. You're already on YouTube if you're watching live, so check them out. And yeah, Fujimaster24 on Twitter is Adam Bittner's Twitter account. Okay, so I see John Robinson said something about better get another quarterback in the portal. Yeah, so let me adjust my seat a little bit here. Let me pull up the show schedule one more time. Make sure I'm on the right page here. I know you guys can't see it, but yeah. So we just got transfer portal update and we got some recruiting news, and we're going to get on out of here. I think what I want to do, I think I'm going to switch screens here because I do have some graphics prepared. Let's go transfer portal. Are you guys ready? Let me put in the chat on YouTube if you're ready for some transfer portal talk. Let's go transfer portal here. As I switch screens, I don't know. I'm curious. I think it should be okay if we switch to the big screen. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm a little bit in the way. Not too much though. Actually, not too bad. Let's go into the transfer portal now. I guess I want to start this off by saying that the transfer portal has just been nuts. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. I mean, I have been drained the last couple of days in trying to understand and trying to get where people might be going. It's just been crazy. And so I've got some research down here. I mean, I got pages of research here, and we're going to talk transfer portal. Just know that it is a fluid situation. So things I'm saying to you right now could change when, you know, an hour. Probably not, but catch my drift a little bit there. But we're going to go through this, and I'm going to try to be as much transparent as I can about what I've got written down. We're going to go through it. I think it's important before we start, though, I want to, and before fatigue sets in, I want to mention real quick kind of my vibes on the transfer portal. And I think it's important to talk about it because I think people are freaking out a little bit. So right now the transfer portal is happening. I think there's already over 1,000 players in the transfer portal since Monday. And there's been a lot of reactions, right? Like, this is just the NFL free agency. What is going on? Why are we doing this? And I understand the frustration, the concern that, you know, the college football is changing, and it is changing. However, I think there's a little bit of an overreaction. There's a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to all of this that's happening. And I have a couple of reasons why. the majority of the players entering the transfer portal right now fall into pretty much two bins. Now, there's a minority that fall into other bins, but we're going to focus on the two larger bins at hand. Number one, a lot of these guys are former 2019, 2020, and 2021 commits that were evaluated during COVID. And not only were they evaluated, but they were evaluating colleges during COVID. So if you think an 18-year-old's mind is already pretty fluid and impactful and impressionable, imagine when you can't even get on campus because of COVID and you're supposed to make a college decision. And you don't even know what you're asking to do. Now flip that around the other way. College coaches are trying to make evaluations without having these guys on campus, et cetera, without meeting their families, et cetera, without seeing them in person. Anyone will tell you being on the sideline watching a game in real speed is a lot different than watching it from an all-22. Those things make a difference. Coaches, recruiters, scout guys, there were mistakes made. Players went to schools they probably shouldn't have gone to. And that right there, we're seeing a correction in the transfer portal this year, especially. So that is one bin. Those kind of people. Wasn't the right fit from the beginning. They stuck it out and yeah, okay, it's time to go. Got some numbers now, got some stats now. Things are looking better. Time to get out. That's one bin. The other bin is guys that still signed around that time period, but have yet to have an opportunity to really hone in on the name, image, and likeness. So they already signed. They already put their letter of intent in before NIL took off. Well, now, hey, I got a year under my belt and I am improving, I am impressing, and I'm looking really good. Well, no one's going to give me a huge bag of cash if I stick to the status quo and stay in there. No. But if I just throw my name in the transfer portal for a couple days, now all of a sudden I'm going to get suitors from not just all around the country, but even from the school I'm already been at. And I can already make more money by investing in myself, even if I go back to the same school. Case in point, Drake May from North Carolina. Fantastic year for North Carolina. Made himself a lot of money this year. People thought he was a Heisman candidate. We knock on UNC a lot because we mess with Ari a little bit as far as him, UNC not being a college football playoff team. But North Carolina and Drake May, they got something brewing there. Now, they just lost their offensive coordinator. I'll talk about that in a second. But Drake May is a good quarterback. And he went into the transfer portal. He wasn't looking to leave. No, sir. He was just looking to cash in that check, baby. But that's a number in the transfer portal. And that's another bin. Guys are looking to cash in. Maybe it's not even that much more. Maybe it's not the Drake May level deal, right? But we've heard things from Keaton Slovis, perfect example. Guy who's been at USC, been at Georgia, been at West Virginia. Now he's looking to go somewhere else. Before he went to West Virginia, he went out to Corvallis, Oregon State. And he wanted X, Y, and Z. He wanted a 4-bedroom house. He wanted a gym that was in his house. He wanted pretty much about $1 million deal when it's all said and done. Oregon State kind of just laughed. And he shopped that around, ended up at West Virginia. Now, and mind you, Slovis hadn't really done very much. Did I say Slovis? I think it might have been JT Daniels. Apologies. Daniels hadn't done very much. Besides what he was coming out of high school. He's kind of just done what he's needed to do since high school. But he's shopping around, and he's going to make money off of it. And that is another bin. And I think that bin's a little smaller than the first bin I mentioned, but both bins are important. And so when you start freaking out about, oh, this is the new norm. Well, yes, the transfer portal is the new norm. But look at, what's happened so far for Penn State. Nothing outrageously crazy in the transfer portal. I mean, there's been some movements, but it hasn't been nuts. And I think it'll come up on the screen in a second for you. But they only have 5 guys in the portal right now. Christian Veyer, who, I mean, respect to him, but he's going to have to go find somewhere else to play. Drew Allar's there. Bo Perbila's coming in. They might go try to get somebody. But, I mean, what would you want him to do? He's not leaving because he thinks he's better than everybody else. He's leaving because he just wants to play football. I don't blame him at all. Rodney McGraw didn't play very much. Respect him, didn't play very much. Jeffrey Davis Jr., cornerback, didn't play very much. Malik McNeil was only a freshman. Not 100% sure of the reasoning. I think maybe he just needed a new scenery. And then finally, the one that just happened today, Devon Talley, a former 4-star prospect from the 2021 class, he's in the portal. But those 5 guys aren't the Drake Mays. Those 5 guys aren't the potential starters at another Big Ten school besides maybe Christian Veyer. And honestly, I love Christian Veyer. I think Christian Veyer is a Power 5 quarterback. But there are a lot of quarterbacks right now in the transfer portal. And it could potentially be hard for him to find a place where he's going to start right away. So I think I hope the best for him, but I think it's going to be a little bit tricky for him. So that's where it's all kind of gone. So I know people are worried about it, but I think it's going to simmer starting probably next year, and it's going to get a little bit better after that. It's a new thing. COVID, NIL plays a large role into what we're seeing so far. So just keep that in mind as we move through this. Let's move on. People asked me earlier, like, portal needs. What do we need, right? What does Penn State need in the portal? I think one of the biggest things, and I have them all listed here, is wide receiver, right? And I mentioned this with a little bit with Adam, but I think it's important we talk about it again. Penn State's got an opportunity here, folks. Drew Allar, there was no red flag when he played this year. Very optimistic about his future. If this is the 5-star guy that Penn State's been waiting for, as Adam just said earlier in the show, when's the last time they really had a guy like this that they've been able to kind of groom from the beginning, get him some positive playing time? I mean, this is exactly what you want. And now, and we're about to talk about it in depth, Penn State's got 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 options in the transfer portal as far as wide receiver that we just know about. Gotta get one of them. Gotta maybe get 2 of them. Maybe not 2 of the top 5, but you got to find a way to get at least one of these guys in the top 5. You have got, if the bag exists, you've got to throw the bag at one of these guys, right? You've got to find a way to get one of these guys on campus. And I'm going to talk about all of them individually in a second. But wide receiver is the biggest portal need you have, because you want to put as much talent around Drew Allar as you possibly can. Because if you can't do that, if you cannot put weapons around this guy, you are going to miss the opportunity of a lifetime. And I do not know how that ends when it's all said and done. So you've got to take advantage of this right here, right now. If you have the chance, you bring in as many of these guys as you can. And you hope they work out, because you have got to give your 5-star quarterback as many weapons as possible to be successful. It's like having the franchise quarterback and then not helping them out. He's already got the fantastic left tackle in Olu Fashanu coming back. He's got a couple other guys along the offensive line coming back. He's going to have what we think to be a pretty good defense. Surround him with a surefire wide receiver core. He's got the good running backs. He's got a good tight end crew. We don't know if Brenton Strange's coming. Just give him a couple more weapons in the wide receiver core and hope for the best. But don't let the reason Drew Allar fails be because you didn't supply enough weapons. Do not let that be the reason. If he ends up not being the guy we thought he was, that's one thing. But do not let it be because there wasn't enough good weapons around him. I beg of you. So wide receiver at the top of my list. Gotta secure that before anything. I think it's close with defensive line. I think you gotta get a defensive lineman too, an interior guy. Now, I'm not going to subscribe to the nonsense that James Franklin spewed after the Michigan game regarding got to be bigger inside. They looked fine against Wisconsin. They looked fine against Minnesota. They looked fine against Ohio State. They looked fine against these teams before with maybe even smaller guys. So I'm not subscribing to that specific nonsense. But having a 300-pound guy like PJ Mustipher is good to have around. And you don't have one of those guys on your roster. Beeman's not going to be him. Zane Durant's not going to be him. Vandenberg's not going to be him. Izzard's potentially getting there, but not quite there. If you can get a big guy up front to clog the holes, you're gonna want to try to get him, right? But even if you can't get a big guy, you want to get somebody to improve that depth. So you want to go to the defensive line. If there's an edge guy out there, you get him because you can't have enough edge guys. Get as many edge guys as you possibly can, no doubt about it. But you got to get wide receiver. You got to get defensive line. We don't know yet if Nick Tarburton can come back. He technically can. We'll see. I'm not too worried about defensive end as is, but same with Adisa Isaac. Offensive line. I think, again, you'd be crazy if there was a guy you liked, which we'll talk about a couple, you have to go get. It'd be silly not to. And then finally, cornerback. You're going to lose Joey Porter Jr. You only got one more year left with Kalen King. You might only have one more year left with Johnny Dixon, and you might only have 1 year left with Daquan Hardy. Marquise Wilson's pretty much out the door, I believe. He walked on senior day. So, and Christian Driver switched to wide receiver. So you got Cam Miller there. Jeffrey Davis is in the transfer portal. You're going to want some more depth there. So you could look to the cornerback position too. And I got 2 defensive backs at least that I want to talk about tonight. So those are the positions I think you got to consider. Let's start with wide receiver because I think it's the big one, right? And that's Dante Cephas. This is the guy I think if you can go get somebody, you go get him. He visited Penn State before. He has one of the best obvious resumes around. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? I mean, he's got over 100 catches in 2 years at Kent State, almost 2,000 yards receiving, over 10 touchdowns receiving. He was a teammate with Daquan Hardy and Tank Smith at Penn Hills High School in Pittsburgh. They're already advocating for him to come. I think this is a guy you can't miss out on, to be honest with you. He's got offers from pretty much everybody, right? UGA, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, UCLA, just to name a couple. He plans on visiting Penn State this weekend, and he wants to be enrolled in January. I think you got to throw the bag at him. I think you got to get this guy right here, right now. Pennsylvania guy, the best in the state, stay home, right? Then you got to go get this guy. I don't watch a bunch of action football, but from what I've heard, this is the real deal. Make it happen. Make it happen. Let's go to another guy high on the list. We were asked about this guy too, and that is Dante Thornton, former Penn State commit, 6'5" guy, still got some really good speed. Never really flourished at Oregon. I think he had a couple injuries or two that maybe slowed him down for a little bit. Had a good day against USC, I believe. Maybe I'm getting that confused with somebody else. But regardless, 24/7 Sports has him as the third best wide receiver in the transfer portal right now. He's good friends with Curtis Jacobs. He's originally from Baltimore, Maryland. We use that relationship. Let's do it. 26 catches, 500 yards, and 3 touchdowns at Oregon. He's getting offers from pretty much everybody, right? USC, FSU, Penn State, Michigan, and Miami are the ones to pay attention to. I saw like a weird WordPress. I'm not sure who put that out. One of his buddies, maybe, of who he's really considering. I think it's gonna be tough for him to not go to USC. I think he has a friend there as well. So I know that he's close with Caleb Williams. So that could be tough. But I think this is one Penn State's definitely in the race for. Would like to see Penn State come away with it. Let's go to the next guy, Jimmy Horn Jr., USF wide receiver. I think he had, I'm not sure how many touchdowns he had in the last 2 years, but last season he had 4 total touchdowns, 500 yards. 37 catches. Nothing outstanding. Speedster. Speed that absolutely kills. Can take a handoff and go 88 and out the gate. Wants to decide before Christmas. I think that's an important part of this. And Colorado. So the story here, when he decided to commit to USF, Jackson State was in his final top three. And that was when Deion Sanders was at Jackson State. So Colorado is definitely going to be somebody interested in here. He has a relation to somebody at Houston as well. So Houston's definitely in the thick of things here as well. So going to be tough. I'm not putting too much faith in this one, but again, a speedster that could really stretch the field for Penn State. And a guy I really like. I don't really know how likely he is, to be honest with you. But a guy I really like, the final wide receiver I want to talk about today, Dorian Singer. Arizona wide receiver, 66 catches, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. He led the Pac-12 in receiving. Colorado, Oregon, Penn State, Miami have offered him. I'm sure it's more than that probably even by now. I like this guy. Had a nice little one-handed catch we put on Twitter. This dude's for real. This dude's for real. He's got a little lankiness to him, but he's got some good height to him. I like him a lot. And I think Penn State would go after this guy hard, to be honest with you. I don't know how inclined he is to come over to Penn State, but I think it's someone you want to go after. 24/7 Sports has him as a number 4 wide receiver in the class. Dorian Singer from Arizona. Again, I think he's the guy that showed out against USC. Just to keep that in mind. 2 more guys I have graphics for, but there's a couple more guys I want to talk about. But those are all the wide receivers. So that's 4 wide receivers there. If Penn State could somehow end up with 2 of those guys, I think they'd be in great shape. Probably not going to happen. If they can get 1, I'd feel pretty good. Let's go to the defense. Elijah Jeudy doesn't plan to decide to January. I saw on Twitter he's visiting Colorado, Boston College, Nebraska, and Syracuse. There might be a 5th visit in there, but it hasn't happened yet. He's from Northeast High School in Philadelphia. I don't really know if this is going to happen. He's a former Texas A&M player. I don't know if this one's going to happen, guys. I haven't heard really very much that this is really even in consideration. So I wouldn't hold out on this guy too much. I know we put him on Twitter quite a bit, but Elijah Jeudy is a guy that I haven't really heard much about. So I'm going to say I would be surprised if it kind of goes, happens. We'll see. Kyrie Jackson, corner from Alabama, defensive back from Alabama. Uh-oh. I might have messed up this graphic. I might not have Kyrie Jackson's graphic, unfortunately. Number 2 corner in the 2021 class. He's a former JUCO guy. He did get suspended at Alabama. We don't know why, so there's maybe a concern there to a certain degree. Pretty much offered by everybody in the country coming out of JUCO. Played 2 years. I think he's played in 21 games for Alabama. Played against Georgia in the national championship. I think he started against Georgia. Played a lot of football. Again, I don't know if that's going to happen, but Kyrie Jackson's another guy that they've offered. We'll see if anything comes from it, but I wouldn't hold your breath too much on that. I do have a couple more guys I wanted to mention real quick, and that is a couple more guys. I mean, by couple, I mean 4. Ventral Cypress, cornerback from Virginia. Silver lining with all the what happened at Virginia and the shooting and everything. They are going to give everybody another year of eligibility. So a rare W from the NCAA, if I will. But that's good to hear. But Ventral Cypress, number 1 player in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal right now. He's got offers from everybody. Notre Dame, Michigan, Tennessee, Texas, LSU. I don't think he's going to come to Penn State, but he's the guy. If you can go get a guy like that, that'd be fantastic. I don't know if that actually happens or not. But he's the dude. He is the dude. I wanted to mention too, Tony Grimes was a corner from North Carolina that was down pretty much between UNC and Penn State. Went to UNC, played a lot early. Wasn't amazing at UNC, but is looking to transfer. I know Penn State fans are like, oh, yeah, I remember Tony Grimes. Not amazing, but we'll see where he might end up. It obviously had the star talent to be really effective. Maybe played too early when he was at North Carolina. I got 3 more guys I want to mention. Offensive line, Ajani. Is it Ajani? I want to double check that, make sure I don't mess up his name. It might be Ajayi Cornelius from Rhode Island. Offensive tackle. He's got offers from everywhere, and I mean everywhere. I don't even have them all because they're just everywhere. Tennessee, Auburn, Oregon, just everybody is wanting this guy. And I want to make sure I say it right. Ajani Cornelius, 6'4", 315-pound offensive lineman from Rhode Island. He's a guy that would potentially play tackle, potentially probably play guard. Wants to commit before Christmas, so we'll see what he wants to do. He wants to take visits. I haven't heard where he might take visits to. Thought Penn State could be involved in this, but now, I mean, everyone's offered him. I don't know at this point. He's been pretty much ready to rock and roll as far as visits since last week. So we're gonna have to wait and see what kind of happens there. Let's go offensive tackle, Jeremiah Byers. This is a recent one. This happened literally a couple minutes before we went on air tonight. All Conference USA as a freshman. I think he was honorable mention this year. Started 13 games in 2021, offensive tackle for UTEP. Don't think he's going to stay at UTEP. You know, I was saying some of those guys go in, they come back out. He's not going to stay at UTEP. He's going to try to go somewhere. Penn State has offered him. Another guy, again, you take these guys if you can because they're that good. So we'll see what happens with Byers. That was a newer offer, so I don't have very much information. And then finally, I want to talk about Darian Varner, defensive lineman for Temple, all AAC, All American Conference. 6'2" guy, had 12 and a half TFLs in 10 games. 7.5 of those were sacks. So, and I think he has over 10 sacks in 2 years so far at Temple. So this guy's pretty solid. I think he weighs about 260, but before last year, he dropped 30 pounds. So he's got a good frame, can do a lot of different things with it. Don't even know if he's been offered yet by Penn State. I think I saw Old Dominion's offered him, but a guy that close to home, you'd think maybe, and obviously with Arnold Ebiketie already kind of there, maybe you can get him. Now, technically, Arnold Ebiketie wasn't there when Varner was there, but maybe something comes of that. We'll see. And finally, I got one more guy. I wanted to mention. That's Terry Roberts, a defensive back from Iowa. Only has 1 interception this last year. He's originally from Erie, Pennsylvania. Was teammates with center Juice Scruggs at Erie. So a little bit of a connection there. Doesn't have a great offer list yet. I think Penn State's on it, Minnesota's on it, Delaware's on it, University of Northern Iowa is on it. Not crazy yet. Good ball skill guy, in right place, right time. Hasn't really put a lot on film. But Terry Roberts is a guy to pay attention to. Again, defensive back from Iowa. And those are all the transfer portal guys I have right now. Obviously, that could change and become more drastic here tomorrow. But that's what I wanted to talk about right now. So I appreciate you guys let me get through that. I got some 2023 updates for you as far as the recruiting class, and then we're going to get out of here. I want to preface this all by saying first, 24/7 Sports, Blue White Illustrated. Blue White Illustrated's got a lot of free stuff on YouTube, which I love. 24/7 Sports got some free stuff, and they got some stuff behind the paywall. We don't talk about the stuff behind the paywall on here because that's not really fair to us. Or it's not fair to us. It's not fair to them if we do that. So we don't do that. Try not to do that at least. So you should consider subscribing to those platforms. Again, Blue and White Illustrated, they put a lot out for free. I'm just going to throw that out there. Just saying. 2023 update, though. So this is kind of a long way of saying And by the way, I want to get back to a comment that happened about 40 minutes ago by John Robinson. Better get another quarterback in the portal before. If we're going to wrap up the portal discussion real quick, yes, I think you got to go ahead and get a quarterback if you can. I already kind of mentioned it. If there's a guy out there that doesn't mind being the backup guy but could play if Drew Allar gets hurt and has experience, you got to find him and you got to go get him, right? I don't know how many people want to sign up for that role, but maybe somebody does. Maybe not right now, but maybe in a month or so. We'll see. I think you got to try to go do that. So thank you again for those questions. Thank you guys for being around on YouTube. I appreciate that as I kind of continue this solo for a little bit. Let's wrap it up with the 2023 class. Again, we're just 2 weeks away from early signing day. So things are getting crazy. A lot of updates. Terry Smith said like a month ago that things were going to get spicy. Like they were going to take maybe 3 or 4 more guys. And we were looking at our sheets. We were like, who could these guys be? Who are you talking about? We found some. I think it's already been announced pretty much everywhere. Let's start with the big one off the bat. I 100% expect this weekend for Penn State to get a commit from Mason Robinson, defensive lineman. He's currently, I guess, technically still committed to Northwestern. Northwestern fired their defensive coordinator, and they fired their defensive line coach. Cares about academics is really Stanford, Penn State, Northwestern. I think there's been enough of a lean there where he's considering Penn State seriously. Originally from Maryland, goes to McDonough High School. That's where Denai Dennis Sutton's from. That's where Curtis Jacobs from. They got a lot of guys from McDonough High School over the years. However, the interesting thing that Sean Fitz said on Blue White Illustrated yesterday was that Robinson originally didn't want to follow in Denai Dennis Sutton's footsteps. And so maybe it was the reason why he didn't want to go to Penn State. But that seems maybe not to be the case. Would not be surprised if Mason Robinson, who's visiting this weekend, commits to Penn State. Very solid player. Had a really good senior year. Put some really good film out there. So Mason Robinson, expect to commit for the 2023 class. I'd be surprised if that doesn't happen. Let's stay in the commit talk. Let's go all the way down to Joseph Mapoye. Guy we've talked about on the show quite a bit. 3-star guy. He's teammates with Zion Tracy. He's also visiting this weekend. Potentially seen as a little bit more of a project. I don't think he's 100% put together as much as like maybe Mr. Robinson is. And here's to you, Mrs. Robinson. Anyway, but I think Mapoye very well could commit. Another 3-star guy could commit this weekend as well. So that gives you a little bit more comfort as far as defensive line moving into 2023 with those 2 guys. If Mapoye doesn't happen this weekend, if Robinson doesn't happen this weekend, I think it's coming really soon. So that's kind of the splash news, if you will, as far as recruiting goes. But there's a couple other guys I wanted to talk about. Daniel Harris. We talked about him a couple times in the last 2 or 3 episodes. Cornerback, originally committed to Georgia. He decommits, 4-star guy from down there in Florida. I think anyone who says they know what's going on with him doesn't know what's going on with him. I mean, I don't think anybody knows. I don't know if Daniel Harris 100% knows yet. Coaching staff was down there a couple times. We'll have to wait and kind of see what's going on there. Georgia was battling back a little bit. Then Georgia didn't really want him because they had other guys. Now Georgia really wants him again. Not sure what's exactly going on there. But Penn State's in the very, very thick of things there. Once to decide before early signing day, I have in my notes. So we'll see if that ends up happening or not. Hopefully it does. I think it would be better for Penn State if it happens sooner than later. Roderick Pleasant, a guy I think Sean and I kind of wrote off a little bit. I'm not saying it's happening. I think it's not close to being done from what I've heard. Again, mostly from Blue and White Illustrated. This could go all the way into February. Early signing days in 2 weeks. But these guys could, they could go all the way to February to the normal signing day if they want to. So this one could go the distance. West Coast guy, though, makes me a little bit worried. I think the only reason Penn State's really in this is because of Terry Smith. And again, just what a job that Terry Smith has done. I mean, just incredible. So I'm not saying expect anything from Pleasant, but what I'm saying is keep one eye on Pleasant. That's all. Conrad Hussey, 4-star safety, committed to Penn State. Again, Fort Lauderdale guys, Santa Aquinas High School. We think they're okay, but Miami wants Hussey bad. I'm not, again, saying to be worried yet, but I think Miami's going to try to battle to get back into that one. So pay attention to that one. I don't have this on the list, but Dakari Nelson had a really good day at camp. I think I don't think it was Brian Doan from 24/7. I think it might have been Steve Wilthon from 24/7 was at a camp and put some highlights. We retweeted some of them onto the Twitter account at Hardcore PSUFB. But Dakari Nelson was looking pretty good today. So that's comforting. Just random defensive back in the South thought there. Cam Wallace, interesting guy, running back kind of guy. Georgia Tech versus Penn State for this one. From Georgia, but he's been on campus. Keep an eye on Cameron Wallace. Athlete technically, but keep an eye on that one. Keyshawn Blackstock, excuse me, not Stack, Stock. Keyshawn Blackstock, interior offensive lineman, JUCO guy, top 5 JUCO guy. James Franklin is out there visiting. They visited quite a bit. He's actually visiting Penn State this weekend as well. That's another guy you might see a commitment from this weekend. I should have maybe included that earlier. I wouldn't be surprised if that one comes to fruition. Edwin Joseph, I heard it on YouTube. I don't think Edwin Joseph was that serious about coming to Penn State, but he is visiting Florida State this weekend. I just had a little note there. I wanted to tie that in. Christopher Johnson, not coming to Penn State this weekend. Originally was going to come. From what I was literally text message on my phone here, Penn State canceled the visit on Christopher Johnson. I don't know what that means. Running back, not sure what that exactly means. Maybe they already know what they want. They got Montgomery. They might have another guy they like in someone I'm about to talk about in a second. Not sure. But they canceled the visit for whatever that means. Another guy, running back, Kedrick Riscano. Former Michigan State commit, visiting this weekend. Was just here on October 30th, so he's been around. He's a top 10 running back, 4-star guy. I don't know if a commit's happening yet, but pay attention to him too. And again, if he's thinking about it, you can only take so many running backs, and maybe that's the reason for a cancellation. But again, that's fully speculation. And then finally, quarterback Jackson Smolik is supposed to be visiting this weekend as well. So there you have it. 2023 news. I am not the recruiting guy. Sean Kane is much more the recruiting guy than I am. But that's for you. I don't know why I pointed up like he's dead. Sean Kane's not dead, just not here tonight. But that's for you, Sean. Hopefully I made you proud with my recruiting prowess today. It took a lot out of me, to be honest with you, but I appreciate it. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you again to Adam Bittner for joining us. Going to try to put some, if you made it this far in the podcast, it means you're probably a really big fan. Going to try to put some more merch items in the merch store. So pay attention for that. Going to get the Bowl Challenge up and running here shortly. So pay attention to that. And we got, I think, a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. I don't think a review has came in yet because I was looking for the review. Sometimes the rating shows up before the review. But we are 5 away, ladies and gentlemen. 5 away from a 5-star review. So if you're listening and you have not dropped a 5-star review, we will read it on the show and we will send you a sticker. Drop a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to get to 100 before the Rose Bowl finishes up. So that'd be fantastic. But that's all I have. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. We will be back Sunday night, not Sunday morning, Sunday night. And Sean Kane will be joining me. Until then, thank you to Adam Bittner. Thank you for you guys on YouTube that hung out. If you haven't already liked the video and subscribed, please do so. And we will see you Sunday. Thank you so much, and you guys take care. Cheers, everybody.